The art of disguising or hiding things like people, vehicles, or using certain kinds of camouflage is something that has been practiced for decades, and especially militaries all over the world. If you can hide your army, you've got the upper hand. But you might not believe some of the amazing things that technology has helped to create. Think that a Harry Potter invisibility cloak is something only in the movie? Then you better stick around and check out some of the most amazing camouflage. 1. Camouflage Trees WW. It might seem odd to want to camouflage trees, but in this case, it really came in handy. You might be thinking to yourself, why would I want to camouflage a tree? Well, for one, they can be used as an observation post and no one would ever know. Ever seen a war-torn area with lots of damage, including burned out trees? The idea is to create something that looks just like one of those dead trees, but able to hide a scout inside. A camouflage team would cut down a real tree and then replace it with a replica. They were often placed in exposed areas where there were no natural surveillance points, and it worked out pretty well, as long as a tank rolling by didn't decide to do a little target practice. The scout hidden inside of this camo tree could radio or signal that the enemy was approaching long before they arrived. 2. Tanks disguised as tigers? When it comes to tanks, they're painted to match the terrain they are deployed to, with certain kinds of camouflage like desert sand or any of the other hundreds of color and stripe combinations to keep them disguised as they made their way to the enemy. One of the more interesting camouflage designs was when the USA painted their American M46 Patton tanks with tiger heads on the front. Okay, it's not really camo, but instead, the design was used to try to demoralize enemy forces during the time. You see, the Chinese and Koreans see the tiger as a symbol of power. If it actually worked is not well documented, but you could probably imagine how terrifying it would be to see a group of M46 Patton tanks headed your way with tiger heads painted on the front. That might be a little demoralizing, if not really scary to see coming your way. Number 3. Psychedelic camouflage. One of the odder camouflage types that were tried in the 1940s on ships was called razzle-dazzle paint. Instead of that boring steel gray paint that you find on most Navy ships these days, British warships were painted with a technique called dazzle or razzle-dazzle. It sounds really fancy, but the paint served a very serious purpose, it turns out. At the time, warships lacked any kind of concealment technology, and no one had really come up with a way to successfully camouflage a ship at sea. The interesting thing is that the paint didn't hide the ships, but instead made them a visually confusing target. The paint jobs were black and white lines and shapes that varied in the direction or place on the ship, and with the contrast, it was difficult for the enemy to estimate the type of ship, its speed, the size, and even its direction. The interesting thing is that some of these patterns are still painted on ships from time to time. Number 4. Shadow Shield. Here's something really cool that has a ton of uses, and it works surprisingly well. It is basically a camouflage shelter that allows hunters to get close enough to their targets to fire shots. It can hide you pretty much like the Predator's cloaking device. It sounds all cool and high-tech, but it's just a simple and brilliant idea. The Shadow Shield is a reflective folding wall that has a small slit where you can place a gun barrel through. You can't see your own reflection in it because it's angled slightly forward. If you were using this to hide in the woods or the forest, no one would even know you were there. Only until you get close enough can you see that it's a mirror, and by then you would realize there was a gun barrel pointing at your head. It's almost certain that soldiers, not just hunters, are using this too. Number 5. Dummy Army. Fake soldiers, fake American tanks, fake Japan planes. Fake soldiers. When it comes to war, the more soldiers and stuff you have, the better your chances of defeating an opposing enemy. However, not all armies could be put together so quickly, or the people just didn't exist. If you don't have an army, then just make one. And that was the idea during the First World War. Royal engineers made dummy soldiers out of paper mache and then painted these dummy servicemen to look real. But that's not the only thing on the battlefield that wasn't real. The British also created dummy inflatable tanks that were pretty darn close looking to the real thing. But the Americans were also into the decoy game, and between 1944 and 1945, staged more than 20 battlefield deceptions. The US recruited over 1,000 men from art schools and ad agencies to form the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, or Ghost Army, in which their jobs were to create decoys and replicas to fool the enemy, and they were successful. The Japanese were also doing this camo dummy stuff too, and in Okinawa, workers constructed fake straw planes which sat on the edges of the airfields near Kadena town. They looked so close to the real thing from the air that American fighter pilots would send bursts of machine gun fire into them, thereby wasting their ammunition on dummy targets. Number 6. Ship camouflage. Is it a ship or an island? Hey, here's a brilliant idea when it comes to camouflaging a ship. Forget the paint. Why not just make the ship look like an island? When the Dutch East Indies fell to the Japanese in 1941, the Allied ships in the area were ordered to flee to Australia. Most Dutch ships were either scuttled or destroyed, except one. The HNLMS Abraham Crimson, whose captain disguised the ship with trees, plants, and vines and anything else the crew could get their hands on to make the ship look like some floating island. It might sound crazy, and it is likely that no one thought they were going to get away with it, as islands don't normally float around the ocean. However, the crew was successful, and the Abraham Crimson was the last Allied ship to escape the Dutch East Indies. Number 7. Quantum Stealth Invisibility Cloak. Camouflage is a big deal in the military. It can mean the difference between winning battles while keeping soldiers unharmed, or being seen and defeated by the enemy. But camouflage can only go so far when it comes to concealing a soldier. Wouldn't it be really cool if you could make your soldiers completely invisible? While that technology seems a bit on the sci-fi side of things, it's actually being developed and called quantum stealth, which works by bending light around an object, even concealing the soldier's shadow. If a soldier walked into a room of people wearing this, no one would know he was there, as long as he was dead quiet. The science is in the special fabric, and it doesn't need a power source. It's pretty crazy, and when you start looking at people showing it off, it almost seems unreal that this technology exists. If this type of thing fell into the wrong kind of hands, it could be used for a ton of purposes, and even robbing someplace while being unseen. Number 8. Shark repellent wetsuits. No one wants to be eaten by a shark, and that's why the company Shark Mitigation Systems created a wetsuit that can be used by surfers or divers that camouflages anyone wearing them to sharks. The suits are designed with special patterns and colors that allow the wearer to blend into the ocean. Most wetsuits are made of entirely black material, which looks like a shark's favorite meal, the seal, and many surfers are mistaken for seals and attacked every year. Now, there's no reason to worry if you're wearing one of these, and as long as you have the $500 the suit costs. Still, that's a small price to pay to keep a shark from eating you. Number 9. Minecraft camouflage. It was September 3rd, 2015, and China was celebrating its 70th anniversary of the end of World War II. And as usual, the country put its military hardware on display with hundreds of fighting vehicles and some 12,000 troops marching through Tiananmen Square in Beijing. But the interesting thing was that, to many eyes, there was one weird big surprise. It would appear that China is now using dramatic digital camouflage patterns. Military vehicles were covered in pixelated squares, some in shades of green and khaki, others in outlandish schemes of blue, white, and black. The chunky patterns closely resemble those blocky textures from everyone's favorite computer game, Minecraft. The interesting thing is that this camouflage does work and was developed over 40 years ago, but it's not known why no one else is using it if it's so good. Number 10. Chameleon camouflage in military. The very latest trend in camouflaging comes from a Russian company called Rus Electronics, which is a material that is capable of changing color and simulate complex images like foliage. The special material can basically change and look exactly like its surroundings, just as a chameleon. The material actually displays an image using polymers, which change colors under electric pulses. It's being used now to protect guided missile bases, and can also be used to protect tanks and other military hardware. But that's not all. Russia also has a soldier camouflaging system that is electronically controlled so that no matter where the soldier is, the suit will completely blend into the soldier's surroundings. The Russian company that designed it, Rostec, have designed a military helmet using the same technology. The idea is to create something to keep a sniper safe, since they have to expose their head when taking a shot. It turns out that this cool stealth system can also be used on tanks and other armored fighting vehicles. We hope you enjoyed the video. Tell us which one of these you thought was the coolest. If you liked the video, then make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will be the first to know when a new video comes out. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.